I never thought I'd be the one to tell my story. But here I am. It's funny how life works, isn't it? One minute, you're just living, going through the motions day by day, and the next, you're forced to reflect, to put your life into words, into meaning. They say pain changes you, but it's more than that. It reshapes you, molds you into someone else, whether you like it or not. My name is Monica Harris. I'm 50 years old, and I've spent most of my life making sure the people I love have everything they need, even if it meant I went without. That's what mothers do, right? We give everything we have, even when it feels like there's nothing left. I've been a mother for 20 years, and I've been a widow for almost 10. The love of my life, my husband, Michael, he died in a car accident. Just like that, in an instant. One moment he was there, his laugh filling the house, and the next, gone. I don't think I've ever fully processed it, if I'm being honest. A part of me is still in that car, with him, holding on to the last words I never got to say. But what's done is done, and I had 2 sons to raise. Malik, my oldest, is 20 now. He's always had a fire inside him. Sometimes it burns so hot I can't help but be proud of him. Other times, that same fire feels like a storm, ready to tear things apart. And Jamal, my youngest, he's 18, he's the quiet one, the thinker, a dreamer. I worry about him most, but I don't ever let him know that. I've learned over the years to hide the things that hurt me, to bottle up the fear because I can't afford to let them see it, not when they need me to be strong. I spent years trying to build a life for us to keep us afloat. After Michael died, I knew the world had changed. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them, my boys. I had to give up dreams I had once held on to, the ones I tucked away in the corners of my mind when life became too real. I worked long hours at a coffee shop, scraping by, doing what I had to do. Every day felt like a battle. Every month, another set of bills piled up, but I kept my chin up. Because that's what mothers do. They carry the weight, they do what's necessary to keep the lights on. But I couldn't stop worrying. I couldn't stop wondering if I was doing enough for them. The weight of the world, the dreams I had to put on hold, all of it was getting to be too much. I stayed up late, making sure the boys were asleep, thinking about everything I'd sacrificed and wondering if they even knew. I gave them everything I had, and in return, I asked for nothing but their love and respect. Was that too much to ask? Was I wrong for wanting that? One evening, I was working my shift at the cafe, as usual. It was late, the kind of late where the city's noise had quieted down, leaving just the hum of traffic and the murmur of people's voices. That's when he walked in. David White, tall, well-dressed, and confident in a way that made me want to shrink back into myself. He was a man who had everything, or so it seemed. I had heard of him, of course. He was a real estate mogul, successful beyond anything I could imagine. People talked about him, whispered about his wealth and power, but I never imagined he would walk into my cafe, not in a million years. He came up to the counter, ordered his coffee, and then, without missing a beat, started a conversation with me. I don't even remember what we talked about, probably something mundane. But there was something about him. Something that made me feel like I wasn't invisible, like I mattered. I've always been the kind of person who blends into the background, the quiet one who watches and listens but never speaks up too much. With David, for some reason, I didn't feel like I had to shrink. At first, I thought maybe it was just politeness, a rich man indulging in a small-town coffee shop. But when he left me a tip that made my heart skip. Not just a generous tip, but a tip that felt like more, a tip that felt like a door was opening to something bigger than I could comprehend. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my life started to change. The next few weeks were a blur. David started coming in more often, and I began to notice how his presence affected me. Not in a romantic way, not at first, but there was something about him that made me feel seen. Like maybe I wasn't just a single mother working at a cafe, but someone who had a purpose, someone who mattered in a world that often overlooked people like me. One day, David sat down at the table near the window. I was busy with the lunch rush, but he caught my eye, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. It wasn't forced either. It felt real. He smiled back, and it was the kind of smile that made everything else fade away. For a second, I forgot about the bills, the stress, the weight of my responsibilities. It felt like I was just me. That afternoon, after my shift ended, he asked me to join him for dinner. I was hesitant. After all, who was I, really? A woman with 2 kids and a past, working at a cafe to make ends meet. But there was something in his eyes that made me think, maybe, just maybe, I deserved this. And so, I went. I never expected that one dinner would change everything. I didn't expect David to keep coming back. The cafe was just a pit stop for him, right? He had the kind of life I couldn't even dream of, a world that operated in a whole different stratosphere than mine. But there he was again, 2 days later, and then 3 days after that. Each time he'd come in, order his usual black coffee, sit by the window, and watch the world go by. And each time we'd exchange pleasantries, talk about the weather, about the coffee beans, about anything and everything and nothing at all. It started to become routine, but there was something in his eyes, in the way he watched me that didn't feel routine. It felt intentional, like he was really seeing me in a way I hadn't been seen in years. I remember the first time he actually asked me about my life. "So, Monica," he'd said, looking at me from across the table, his coffee untouched for a moment, "tell me about your family. I see you're always here, always working. You've got 2 sons, right?" The question caught me off guard. Most people who came into the cafe didn't bother to ask about me. I was just the woman behind the counter. But David seemed interested, genuinely curious. I hesitated. For a second, I wondered if I should tell him about my boys, Malik, full of ambition and fire, and Jamal, quieter, more thoughtful. I wondered if he'd think less of me, or worse. Pity me, that's the thing with people who have everything. It's easy for them to feel sorry for those who don't. But David didn't make me feel that way. His eyes weren't pitying. They were waiting for me to speak as if my words had value. I sighed, setting down the dish I was washing. "Yeah, I've got 2 boys," I said finally. "Malik's 20 and Jamal's 18. They're my world, been raising them on my own since their dad passed." David nodded thoughtfully, as if he understood, and I guess he did in his own way. His life was built on hard work too, though it looked different from mine. "How do you manage it all, Monica? I imagine it can't be easy." I shrugged, trying to keep the conversation light. "You do what you have to do, and I love them more than anything. You figure it out as you go." He sat there quietly for a moment, his gaze turning introspective. I couldn't read him. Maybe it was the way he carried himself. His calm confidence, or maybe he was just a man who knew how to listen. Either way, it was rare in my world to have someone who genuinely seemed to care, even for a second. "I admire that," he said finally. "It's not easy being a single mother. I can tell you've made a lot of sacrifices." "Sacrifices, yeah," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. "But what else can you do? They need me, and honestly, I don't know any other way to live." David tilted his head like he was thinking. Then, without warning, he said, "You know, I could help you with whatever you need. I know people I can connect you. I could make things easier for you for your boys." The words caught me off guard, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. "What do you mean?" I asked, unsure if I heard him right. He smiled. "I'm in real estate, as you know, but I'm also invested in a lot of different ventures. What if I told you I could help you expand this cafe, or help you find a better paying job, something where you wouldn't have to work yourself to the bone every day?" I laughed, though it wasn't because it was funny, it was more because it felt absurd. David White wanted to help me, a woman who worked behind a counter, scraping by, trying to get by day to day. "You're serious?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You do that for me?" "Why not?" He replied, his eyes unwavering. You're not just another face in the crowd, Monica. I can see that. And I think you deserve better than this. You deserve more. I didn't know what to make of it. A part of me wanted to jump at the chance, dreamed of it even. Maybe a life where I didn't have to juggle so many things at once, where I didn't have to wake up at the crack of dawn, exhausted and drained, only to do it all over again the next day. A part of me wanted to reach out, to let him help me. But there was another part of me, an old part of me, the part that had been beaten down by life, that didn't believe in things like this. People like David didn't just offer help without wanting something in return. There had to be a catch. "You don't even know me," I said, shaking my head, my voice lower than I meant it to be. "I'm just a woman trying to make a living, trying to keep my boys on the right path. You don't owe me anything." David didn't react. He just looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something behind his eyes, compassion, maybe, or just understanding. "No one ever owes anyone anything, Monica. But that doesn't mean we can't help each other. We're all just trying to figure this out. You don't have to do it alone." I didn't respond immediately. My thoughts were racing. Could I really trust this man? He had money, power, connections. Maybe I could use that. Maybe it would make a difference for my boys, for the future I was so desperately trying to build for them. But the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't just let him swoop in and fix everything, could I? I wasn't that woman. I wasn't the kind of person who relied on someone else. I had worked hard for everything I had, even if it wasn't much. "I'll think about it," I said finally, and that was all I could give him, at least for that moment. David left the cafe that afternoon like he always did, walking out with a kind word and a smile as though nothing had changed. But something had changed. In that brief conversation, he had opened a door, one I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind. The temptation to accept his offer, his help, was real, but it was also terrifying. What did it mean for me? What did it mean for my sons? Was I ready to trust a stranger with my future? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I had been living on autopilot for so long, just going through the motions. And now, for the first time, someone was offering me something, an opportunity to change my life, to change my sons' lives. It was almost too much to process, but I couldn't ignore the possibility, not when it felt like the universe was pushing me in this direction. By the end of the week, I found myself standing in front of the cafe's door, staring out at the busy street. My sons needed me, and I needed them. But maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to do something for myself. To stop surviving and start living. And if that meant accepting help from someone like David White, someone who had no reason to care about me or my family, then maybe it was time to take that step, no matter how uncertain it felt. I didn't call him right away. I couldn't. The offer David made, it lingered in my mind like an unspoken promise, and I wasn't sure I was ready to accept it. You see, I've spent my whole life taking care of others, never asking for help. It's not just pride, it's survival. You get used to doing things on your own, even if it means sacrificing parts of yourself along the way. And this was different. This wasn't just a loan, a favor, or a kind gesture. This was someone who had everything, offering me a chance at something bigger. It was a door I had to choose to walk through. But as much as I hesitated, the weight of my daily routine, the constant grind of working to make ends meet, of trying to steer Malik and Jamal toward a better life, began to make the decision for me. I couldn't keep living like this, not when I could see that my sons were growing up faster than I could catch up with them. They needed more from me than I could give, and if I was honest with myself, so did I. The cafe was busier than usual the next morning. My feet ached from standing all day, but I didn't mind. It was what I did. I was used to it. I'd learned how to work through pain, to push through the exhaustion and pretend I wasn't drowning in it. But that day, something was different. The air felt thick, heavy, and my thoughts kept drifting back to David, to his words, to his offer. By the time the evening shift started, I knew what I had to do. I found his number in the pile of receipts I'd thrown into my purse that morning. My fingers were shaky as I dialed it, my mind racing. What was I going to say? How would I explain why I hadn't called sooner? But when he answered, his voice was calm, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Monica," David said, sounding more like a friend than a businessman, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." I took a breath, steadying myself. "David," I started, my voice sounding small even to me, "I've been thinking about what you said, and I've decided I'm ready to talk." There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then he spoke again, his tone lighter, more inviting. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. How about dinner tomorrow night? We'll sit down and we'll talk about what you want, what I can help with." I didn't hesitate. "All right. Tomorrow night it is." The next evening, I found myself sitting in the plush, leather booth of a restaurant that felt too fancy for someone like me. The soft glow of the chandeliers overhead, the polished wood floors, the hushed conversations of well-dressed patrons, it all felt like a world that didn't belong to me. But then David walked in, and somehow it all seemed to fit. He looked like he belonged here, like he'd always belonged in places like this. He wore a dark suit, but it wasn't the kind of suit that made you feel like you were underdressed. It was the kind that made you feel like he was the one who made the rules. "Monica," he greeted, his smile warm. He reached across the table and took my hand in his, an unexpected gesture, but one that felt natural coming from him. "I'm glad you decided to come. I know this might feel a little out of the ordinary for you, but I promise you I want to help." I nodded, trying to suppress the feeling that I was out of my depth. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate it." David's eyes softened as though he understood exactly how I was feeling. "You don't have to thank me, Monica. I'm doing this because I believe you've got potential. You're working hard. You've been doing this on your own for so long, and that's admirable. But I can see the toll it's taken on you. You don't have to carry all of that by yourself anymore." I swallowed hard, looking down at my hands, suddenly aware of how tired they were. Tired from the years of working, of worrying, of trying to hold it all together. "I don't know how to let someone else help," I confessed, almost too quietly for him to hear. "I've been doing this for so long, I don't know what it would be like to rely on anyone else." David leaned back in his seat, his eyes steady, almost like he was waiting for me to truly understand something. "You don't have to do everything alone, Monica. You've been carrying your family for so long, your sons, your life, your dreams. But there's nothing wrong with letting someone help, especially when it's someone who genuinely wants to see you succeed." The words hung in the air, and I realized something. He wasn't just talking about money or business deals. He was talking about my life, about the weight I carried every single day, about the part of me that had never known how to ask for help, let alone accept it. "So, what are you suggesting?" I asked, finally meeting his eyes, my voice a little steadier now. David's expression grew more focused, and he set his drink down. "I want to help you expand your cafe. It's a good business. You've got a loyal customer base, and I think with the right support, you could really turn it into something special. You'd have more control, more time for yourself, and you'd be able to invest in your son's future, Malik's future, especially. He's got a lot of promise, and I think he could really benefit from having a role in something bigger than just what he's been doing, what you've been doing." I felt a knot form in my stomach. He was right about Malik. Malik was ambitious, but he needed more. He needed guidance, and I couldn't give him that on my own. I couldn't give him the world, no matter how hard I worked. But the thought of taking help from David, it felt too much like admitting that I couldn't handle it all. "I'm not sure," I said, shaking my head slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready to make those kinds of decisions. I've been trying to keep things small, manageable. It's been enough." David didn't press, but his next words landed in my chest with surprising weight. Monica, you've been keeping things small because it's all you've known, but that doesn't mean it's all you're capable of. Sometimes, we need someone to show us the bigger picture. I'm offering to help you see that. You don't have to take everything on yourself anymore. The silence between us felt long, but I knew this moment was important. The decisions I made here tonight would change the course of my life. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard him. I couldn't pretend I wasn't tempted by the possibility of more, of a life where I didn't have to constantly wonder if I was enough. David was offering me a way out, a way up. It wasn't just about the cafe. It was about everything I had given up in my life, everything I had sacrificed for my family. It was about the chance to finally let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. I took a deep breath, and then I made a choice. "All right," I said, my voice quiet but sure. "Let's talk. Let's see where this can go." And just like that, something shifted in me. I wasn't sure where this would lead or what it would mean for my family, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that I could have more than just survival, that I could have a chance to thrive. The days after our dinner were a whirlwind, and I could hardly catch my breath. David's offer wasn't something I could easily ignore, nor was it something I could jump into without thinking. It was like a door had been opened, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through it. He had laid it all out: help with the cafe, connections to people who could help me grow my business, a chance to give Malik and Jamal opportunities I couldn't have dreamed of. But even as he spoke of possibilities, something inside me was holding back. It wasn't just pride anymore, though that was certainly part of it. It was fear. Fear of change. Fear of what it might cost me to step out of my comfort zone of letting someone, especially someone like David, into my life in a way that felt too close, too personal. I knew David had money. He didn't have to be modest about it. But what did he want in return? What was the catch? In all my years, I'd learned that nothing came without a price. People didn't just offer help to strangers like me without expecting something in return. What did he see in me? What did he want from me? It wasn't that I didn't trust David. There was something about him that felt genuine. But trust doesn't come easy when you've been burned before. When you've spent your life watching people take what they can and move on, leaving you to pick up the pieces. The cafe stayed busy that week, but my mind was elsewhere. I was constantly running through scenarios in my head, playing out what could go wrong. What if Malik didn't take well to David's help? What if Jamal, too, felt threatened by this new world I was stepping into? They were both my boys, and I loved them more than anything in this world, but I wasn't sure how they would react to seeing me leaning on a man like David. They were used to me doing it all on my own. They didn't need another man in their lives. At least that's how I saw it. David called the next morning after our dinner. His voice was calm and collected, just as I remembered. "Monica," he said, "I wanted to follow up with you. I know things like this can feel overwhelming, and I don't want you to feel rushed into anything. I'm here to help whenever you're ready, but I think the sooner we get started, the better. You've got something really special with that cafe. We just need to give it a little push. Let me know if you want to meet again." His words were kind, patient, almost too patient. I could hear the sincerity, but it still made me uneasy. Don't rush," I repeated to myself, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't in a hurry. There was no deadline. No one was forcing me. But even as I said that to myself, I knew something had to change. I had to decide. By the end of the week, I agreed to meet him again, this time in his office. I didn't know what to expect. His office was everything I imagined it would be: clean, sleek, organized. It was the kind of place that made you feel small, even if you weren't trying to. But when David walked in, it was like he brought the whole room to life. He was comfortable here, he belonged here, and for the first time I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I could belong here too. "Monica," he greeted me warmly as I sat down. "I'm glad you came. I want to show you some of the potential I see in your cafe, but before we do that, I want to talk about something else. I raised an eyebrow. Something else. David sat down across from me, his expression turning more serious. You've been cautious, and I get that. This is a big decision, but I also need to make sure we're on the same page about what you want out of all of this. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? David leaned in slightly, his gaze steady. I've seen this before. People who are afraid of change, afraid of letting someone else in, even when that change could be the best thing for them. And I want to make sure you're not holding back because you don't trust me or because you're scared of what could happen if you let me help. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like he'd reached inside my chest, pulled out the one thing I hadn't admitted even to myself, and laid it bare. I'm scared, I confessed, my voice soft, almost a whisper. I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I can trust you. David didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded. I understand. You've been doing this on your own for so long, I can't expect you to just throw that all away. But here's what I'm offering. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to give you a chance to help you see what you can accomplish. You deserve more than just surviving, Monica. And I think your boys deserve more than just surviving, too. I felt a lump rise in my throat. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Malik and Jamal, about their futures, about the future I had fought so hard to build for them, even when it seemed like there was nothing left to give. David, I said, my voice thick, I'm scared of failing. I'm scared that if I let you in, I'll lose control of everything I've worked for, and I'm scared that my boys won't understand. David sat back, his eyes unwavering. You don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to lose control. But if you're going to do this, you'll have to let go of that fear. You'll have to trust someone other than yourself for the first time in a long time. The words lingered in the air between us, heavy with the weight of everything they meant. I didn't know if I could trust him fully, not yet. But I knew this. I couldn't keep doing it all on my own. My whole life had been about survival, about scraping by. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to finally live. The conversation turned to business after that, and I followed David's lead, listening as he outlined the possibilities, the steps we'd take to improve the cafe, the connections he could make for me. But even as I listened, something inside me had already shifted. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a glimmer of hope, a chance that I could finally give my family and myself a better life. A chance to move beyond survival and into something that resembled living. That night after the meeting, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city sounds distant but constant, and I thought about the choice ahead. I could stay where I was, content with what little I had, or I could take a risk, step into the unknown, and trust that I was worth more than just getting by. It wasn't easy, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This was my chance. My opportunity to take back control, not just for me, but for my sons. And even if it was terrifying, maybe that was exactly what I needed. The next morning, I called David. I'm ready, I said. Let's do this. And just like that, my world shifted. The decision was made. As the days passed, I felt the weight of it settle on me, light and heavy at the same time, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to catch me. I kept wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I'd taken the wrong turn. But even with the doubts gnawing at me, there was something else stirring in my chest, a quiet hope. A hope that had been buried for so long I didn't even realize it was there. David was true to his word. Over the next few weeks, we started putting plans into motion for the cafe. I met with his team, learned about the business side of things I had always ignored in favor of the day-to-day survival. We talked about renovations, branding, and how we could bring in more customers, make the place more than just a cafe, but a community hub, a space where people could come and feel like they were home, a place I could be proud of. But as we made progress, there was still a part of me that resisted, something deep inside me, rooted in years of doing it on my own, telling me that I was giving up too much. That trusting someone, letting them in, meant I was losing control. But every time I looked at Malik and Jamal, I knew this was what I had to do. This was what I was working for. And in the quiet moments when I let myself dream, I imagined a future where I wasn't just surviving, I was living. It was early in the morning, the cafe still quiet, and the warm light of the rising sun filtered through the window. I was prepping for the day, wiping down counters and arranging chairs when Malik walked in. His face was set in that way he had when he was thinking, not angry, but serious. "Morning, Ma," he said, his voice flat like he was trying to keep something buried. I didn't look up at first, just kept wiping the counter. "Morning, baby. You got something on your mind?" Malik stepped closer, his hands shoved in his hoodie pockets. "I've been hearing things about you and David, about the cafe." I stopped, finally meeting his eyes. There it was, the weight of it, the conversation I'd been avoiding. "Malik, I don't like it, Ma," he cut me off. "You're letting him change things around here. This isn't how we've done things. We've always made it work on our own. Why now? Why him?" His words stung more than I thought they would, but I couldn't let him see it. I knew where this was going. He was angry. Not at me, really, but at the idea that everything we had built could be taken apart and replaced with something unfamiliar. "Malik, I'm not letting him change everything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just taking a chance. I've been working my whole life to keep this place running, and it's not enough anymore. I need help. We need help." "Help?" His voice was thick with disbelief. "From him? Why can't you just trust me and Jamal? We've been working. Ma, we've been doing our part." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The one who didn't understand why I stayed up late, why I pushed myself to the limit just to make sure he and Jamal had food on the table. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this to give us a better future, Malik. For you, for Jamal, for all of us." He didn't say anything for a moment. I could see the wheels turning in his head. Then, finally, he sighed. "I don't know if I can just sit back and let someone else come in and take over." I felt the tension in my chest, but I didn't let it show. "Malik, no one's taking over. This is still our place. You're still a part of it. I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere. But this is my chance to do more than just get by. Don't you want that for us?" He stared at me, his jaw clenched tight. Finally, he shook his head. "I don't know. I just don't want you to forget about us, Ma. You've always been there for us. Don't let him change that." I nodded, my heart heavy. "I won't forget about you, Malik, I promise." He seemed to think about that for a second, then gave a stiff nod. "All right, but I'm not just going to sit back, Ma. You better not forget who's been here." He turned and walked out, the door chiming behind him. My heart felt like it was in a vice, tight and aching. I knew he was scared. Scared of losing me, scared of change. But I also knew that the one thing he and Jamal had never seen, at least not clearly, was how much I had carried on my own. I didn't want them to carry that weight forever. I didn't want them to feel the same pressure I had. But this was hard. Harder than I thought it would be. The following days felt like a balancing act. I kept the cafe running smoothly, tried to manage the changes with David, and kept my boys from feeling like I was abandoning them. Malik didn't say much after our conversation, but I could see the conflict in his eyes whenever he came by the cafe. It hurt more than I let on. But the real challenge was Jamal. Jamal, the quiet one, the one who didn't speak up as much but always watched, always listened. He was the one who would ask questions when Malik was too angry to do so. And I knew, deep down, that Jamal was just as unsure about all of this as his brother. Maybe more, but he didn't have the words for it. One evening, after the cafe closed, Jamal stayed behind to help me clean up. I was wiping down the counter when I noticed him standing in the doorway, watching me. "You okay?" I asked, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking like he was about to say something important but holding it back. "Ma, about David. What's really going on with you two? I looked at him carefully, trying to gauge if he knew more than he was letting on. What do you mean? You're letting him into our lives, Ma, he said, his voice a little more strained. You're letting him help. You don't usually do that. What's changed? I paused, wiping my hands on my apron. Jamal, I'm not letting him in like that. I'm doing what's best for all of us. For you, for Malik, for the future. You guys don't understand how hard it's been for me. You don't see the struggle, the way things keep getting harder. I know, Ma, Jamal said quietly. I see it, but I also see how you're starting to change, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't want you to forget about us, Ma. You've always been our rock. I felt my chest tighten. This was the part I hadn't anticipated. I had expected Malik to react, but not Jamal. Not the one who always stayed in the background, always observing. He was scared, too, and I could feel the weight of his words, like a warning and a plea all at once. I won't forget you, Jamal, I said softly. You and Malik, you're my life. This is for all of us. It's not about David, it's about giving us a chance at something better. He didn't say anything after that. He just nodded like he wasn't sure if he believed me, but he didn't know what else to say. As he finished helping me close up, I realized something. The path I had chosen wasn't just mine. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my boys, about the family I had fought so hard to build, and about how they saw me. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be simple. But for the first time in my life, I realized that maybe I didn't have to do it alone. And maybe, just maybe, I could show my sons that there was more to life than surviving. It wasn't long before the cafe began to feel like something new, something different. I wasn't sure if it was the renovations David had suggested or the new branding we had started working on, but there was a buzz in the air, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like we were on the cusp of something bigger, something beyond just making ends meet. And yet, despite all the excitement and promise, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing too fast. Malik's reluctance was still there. I could see it in the way he kept his distance. Even when he came by to help with some of the work, his eyes never met mine. He was doing the motions, but his heart wasn't in it. I didn't blame him. He was afraid of what this would mean for us, for him, for our family. Jamal, on the other hand, had stayed quieter than usual. He hadn't voiced any concerns, but I saw the way his brows furrowed when he looked around the cafe, when he watched the changes unfold. He was always the more introspective one, and I couldn't tell whether he was processing or just burying his feelings beneath that quiet demeanor. David had been patient, too patient some days. He didn't push me to make decisions faster than I was ready to. But sometimes, I could see the flicker of impatience in his eyes when he talked about the next steps. It wasn't anything he said outright, but I knew. He wanted things to move faster. He had a vision, a clear, strategic plan, and he needed me to buy into it fully. I was still hesitant. Every time I thought about taking the next step, I thought about my boys, about how they would react, how it would affect our home. I had always been the one to hold everything together. What would it mean if I let someone else have a piece of that control? It was one afternoon when things came to a head. Malik came by to grab something from the cafe, his face tight with the same look of frustration I'd seen in him for weeks. I hadn't expected him to bring it up, but I should have known it was coming. "Ma, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but cold. I froze mid-motion, wiping down the counter, my heart already racing. I knew what this was about. He wasn't going to let it slide anymore. I could feel the walls closing in, could sense that this was the moment where everything would either break or come together. "What about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even though it shook slightly. "I've been hearing things," he said, his voice carrying that edge that told me he was done holding back. "About how much control you're giving David. You're letting him call the shots, Ma. This is our place, not his." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my temper in check. This wasn't just about the cafe anymore. This was about trust. Malik, I'm not letting him take over. I'm just letting him help us get ahead. I don't have the answers. I'm doing the best I can. By handing the reins over to him, Malik's words were sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. You've always told us that we have to fight for what we want, that we can't just sit back and let people walk all over us. And now, you're letting some rich guy come in and tell us how to run our business. I felt the weight of his words, felt the sting of his anger deep inside. He wasn't wrong, not entirely. I had always fought for everything, always taken care of it myself, even when it seemed impossible. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about living. You don't understand, Malik, I said, my voice tight. This is about more than the cafe. It's about giving us a future. It's about giving you a future. You and Jamal, I can't do this alone anymore. You don't have to do it alone, Ma, he said, his voice cracking. I'm here, I've always been here, but you've got to stop acting like we need someone else to fix things. We can do this on our own. You raised us to be strong, to figure things out. Don't throw that away for some guy who doesn't know anything about us. His words hit me hard, harder than I expected. They weren't just about David. They were about me, about everything I had done, about everything I was trying to do. And for the first time, I realized that maybe I hadn't fully understood what Malik needed or what he feared. He wasn't just afraid of losing the cafe, he was afraid of losing me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I'm not throwing anything away, Malik, but I can't keep doing this alone. You think I haven't tried? You think I don't want to give you everything you deserve? I'm trying to give you a better life, Malik. Not just for me, but for you and Jamal. You think I like the idea of giving up control? You think I like letting someone else in? No, I'm scared too, but I don't have any other options. He stood there for a long moment, the tension in the room thick enough that I could feel it pressing on my chest. Finally, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. I just don't want you to forget about us, Ma. I don't want to be some project you have to fix. We're your family, we should come first. My heart ached at his words. This wasn't just about David. It was about me and my role in his life, in Jamal's life. They were my everything, and here I was, taking a chance on something that could tear us apart. I won't forget you, Malik, I said softly. I promise. That night, I sat in the kitchen long after the cafe had closed, my mind racing. I had thought I was doing what was best for my family, but what if I was wrong? What if, in trying to secure a better future for them, I was losing sight of what truly mattered us? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep sacrificing my relationship with my sons for the sake of a business deal. As much as I wanted to believe that David's help was the key to our future, I realized that I was the one who needed to make the decisions, and I had to do it for the right reasons. The next day, I called David. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Monica," he said, his voice calm as always. "How are you?" "I'm okay," I replied, my words careful. "David, I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I think I need to slow things down. I need to do this on my own, at least for now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Monica, I understand, but I want you to know that I'm here when you're ready, whatever you decide." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. Part of me felt relief, part of me felt like I was letting go of something important. But in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice for me and for my family. "I appreciate everything you've done, David, but I need to figure this out on my own." He didn't argue, he didn't try to change my mind. He just said, "Take your time, Monica, I'll be here." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The decision had been hard, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control, not just of the cafe, but of my own life. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would be full of uncertainty, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. I had my sons. I had my family. and together we would find our way. The decision to slow things down with David wasn't easy. The moment I hung up the phone, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I making a mistake? Was I letting an opportunity slip through my fingers, an opportunity to finally breathe, to give my family the life I had been dreaming of for so long? I couldn't ignore the voice in the back of my mind telling me that I was doing the right thing, but it was hard to quiet the fear that this would cost me. I spent the next few days in a kind of limbo, balancing between the old and the new. The cafe was buzzing with the usual activity, the familiar rhythm of my routine giving me comfort. But even as I wiped down the counters, prepared the coffee orders, and exchanged pleasantries with regular customers, there was a part of me that felt distant, disconnected. I wasn't sure anymore if I was just going through the motions or if I was really living. Malik had been quieter than usual. For days after our confrontation, I noticed he was avoiding me more and more. It wasn't just the cafe. He didn't come around as much, and when he did, it was brief, like he was there out of obligation rather than genuine desire to be with me. I couldn't blame him. I knew I had hurt him by making decisions without fully considering how they affected him. But I was his mother, and sometimes, as a mother, you have to make hard choices, even if it meant your kids didn't understand. Jamal, too, was more distant, but it wasn't anger that kept him silent. It was something else. He had always been the quiet one, the observer, and now it seemed like he was watching everything unfold with quiet apprehension. I saw it in the way he fidgeted with his fingers when he walked into the cafe, in the way he watched me, like he was waiting for me to finally make sense of it all. That morning, as I was stocking the shelves, Jamal walked in. His eyes met mine, but he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there watching me work, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets. "Ma," he finally said, his voice soft. "We need to talk." I stopped what I was doing, my heart skipping a beat. Not again, not this. I had been hoping we could avoid this conversation, but I knew it was coming. "Yeah?" I asked, my voice steady but my insides in turmoil. "What about?" He shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "About everything. About you and David. About how things are changing. It's hard, Ma. I'm just trying to make sense of it." I let out a long breath, stepping closer to him. "I know it's hard, baby. I didn't want you to feel like I was changing things without thinking about you or Malik. But sometimes we have to make decisions that aren't easy. I'm doing what I think is best for all of us. For you, for Malik, for the future." Jamal looked at me, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to figure out if I was really seeing him. "I know, Ma, but I'm scared. I'm scared that all of this, is going to change us, and I don't know if I'm ready for that." I wanted to pull him into my arms, tell him everything would be okay, that I would never let anything tear us apart, but I knew better than to offer false promises. The truth was, I wasn't sure about the future either. I was scared too. I didn't know what would happen once we took this step, but I knew we couldn't keep standing still. "I'm scared too, Jamal," I said quietly. "I'm scared of what it means to trust someone else, to let someone else in. But I can't do this on my own anymore, and I don't want you to have to carry everything alone either. It's not about David. It's about making sure we don't keep struggling, making sure you and Malik have a future that's better than just surviving." He didn't say anything right away, just stood there, processing my words. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but I also saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the same uncertainty that I felt. "I don't want to lose you, Ma," he finally said, his voice small, almost vulnerable. "I don't want things to change between us." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere, Jamal. I promise. But sometimes change is necessary. We're not just moving forward for the sake of moving forward. We're doing this to make sure we have a future. For all of us." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before looking back up at me. "I get it. I want to make sure we don't forget where we come from, that no matter what happens, we stay a family. His words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about the cafe. It wasn't just about business deals or outside help. It was about my family, my boys. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had been so focused on providing for them, on making sure they had everything they needed, that I had forgotten what mattered most: us, our connection, our bond, the love that had always been the glue holding everything together. "You're right," I said softly. "We will never forget that, Jamal. No matter what happens, we're in this together, always." He smiled at me then, a small but genuine smile. It was the first time in days I had seen that warmth in his eyes. "Thanks, Ma," he said quietly. The days following that conversation felt different. Not perfect, not easy, but different. I could sense a shift between us, a subtle change in the air. It wasn't that everything was fixed, but it felt like the weight of the unspoken had finally been lifted. Malik still wasn't fully on board with my decisions, but he wasn't as distant either. It was like the walls he had built up were starting to crumble piece by piece. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still things to work through, emotions to untangle, but for the first time, I felt like we were finally moving towards something that resembled progress. Not just in the cafe, but in our lives. As I sat at the kitchen table later that evening, the quiet hum of the city just outside the window, I realized something important. I had spent so much of my life running on autopilot, doing what needed to be done, making sure we had what we needed to survive, that I hadn't taken the time to really live. But now, I was ready to live, not just for my sons, but for me too. The next day, I called David. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I was ready to see it through. I owed it to my family. I owed it to myself. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady as I spoke to him over the phone. "Let's pick up where we left off." He didn't respond right away, but when he did, there was a note of understanding in his voice. "We'll take it slow, Monica. We'll do it the right way. You've got my word." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't alone in this. I didn't have to do it all by myself. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The decision to reach out to David again felt like stepping into uncharted territory. The doubts that had clouded my mind for so long began to clear, replaced by something that had been absent for years: hope. Hope that this wasn't just a pipe dream, but a chance to build something real. But hope, I had learned, was a double-edged sword. It was easy to get swept up in it, but it could just as easily lead you astray. The key, I realized, was balance. When I called David and told him I was ready, I didn't know exactly what would come next. All I knew was that I couldn't keep walking in circles, stuck between what I was afraid of and what I knew I needed to do. It was time to act, time to trust, and time to stop doubting myself. I had spent so many years wondering if I was enough, if my choices were good enough, if my sacrifices had been worth it. But now, I wasn't just making choices for myself. I was making them for Malik and Jamal. For us. David had a way of making everything seem so clear. Every time we met, he spoke with the kind of certainty that had been missing from my life. He had plans, he had strategies, and more importantly, he had the connections I didn't have, connections that could elevate the cafe into something bigger. He never pressured me. He never pushed too hard. But the possibilities he laid out in front of me were undeniable. We met the next week, and I could already feel the weight of this new chapter in my life settling into my bones. "Monica," David said, his voice steady, "I'm glad you decided to take the next step, but we have to start thinking about how we can turn your vision into something more sustainable. We need to make the cafe a place that people not only want to visit, but need to come to. A space that feels like home, but also has a buzz, a place people talk about." I nodded, listening carefully as he continued. He spoke about customer experience, creating events, improving the decor, and most importantly, reaching a wider audience. He wasn't just talking about the cafe anymore. He was talking about a brand, something that would live beyond the walls of the cafe and become part of the community. I had never thought of it that way before, but the more he spoke, the clearer it became. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about thriving. David's excitement was contagious. He wasn't just seeing the cafe as a small business in a small town. He saw potential I had been too close to the ground to see. And as much as I resisted the idea of letting someone else take the reins, I couldn't deny the truth in his words. "I'm with you," I said, finally. "Let's do this. Let's make it something more than just a cafe." He smiled, and I saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. It wasn't just about business. There was something else, an unspoken bond forming between us, a mutual respect. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. David introduced me to his network, people who could help me redesign the cafe, streamline the operations, and expand the customer base. We met with contractors, marketing experts, and even local event coordinators. David's team was full of ideas that I had never even considered. They spoke about things like ambience, customer experience, social media presence, and making the place a community hub. It was a whole new world, and I was trying to keep up, my mind racing to absorb it all. Meanwhile, at home, things were still tense with Malik and Jamal. Malik, as expected, was still on edge. He didn't like the idea of me giving so much of my power away to David, and I could see that it ate at him every time he came by the cafe. He was so used to me doing everything myself, being the one to make decisions, to carry the weight of our family on my shoulders. This change, this trust, was hard for him to swallow, but I wasn't going to let his fear stop me. I couldn't. Jamal, on the other hand, was quieter. As always, he observed, taking everything in but saying little. I could tell he was still uncertain, still processing the changes. But I knew Jamal well enough to know that he wouldn't let me fail. He might not have understood everything I was doing, but I had faith in him. He was stronger than he realized. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, I sat down with both of my sons at the kitchen table. The air between us had shifted. There was an unspoken tension that neither of them knew how to navigate. But I knew this conversation had to happen. "Malik, Jamal," I began, my voice firm but warm. "I know you both have your reservations about everything happening at the cafe. I understand why you're worried. I do. But this isn't just about me. It's about us. It's about the future we're building together." Malik shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just don't get it, Ma. Why him? Why are you trusting him so much?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I'm trusting him because I need to, Malik. I need to trust that this is the right decision for us, and I'm doing this because I want a future where you don't have to struggle like I have, where you don't have to work day and night just to keep things together." Jamal looked up, his eyes thoughtful. "We get it, Ma," he said softly. "It's just hard, you know? You've always been the one holding everything up. It's hard to see you let someone else in." I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt in my chest. "I know it's hard, but I can't keep doing this alone. And I don't want you guys to feel like you have to carry everything by yourselves either. We're a team, okay?" Malik didn't respond at first. He just stared at the table, his jaw clenched, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Jamal sat quietly, looking between us, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, Malik sighed. "I just don't want to lose you, Ma. I don't want things to change between us. I don't want to feel like we're being pushed out." "You're not being pushed out," I said, my voice softer now. "You'll always be my priority. Always, but you have to trust me. This is something I need to do, not just for me, but for all of us." The room was quiet for a long moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then Malik spoke again, his voice quieter. "I don't know if I'll ever get it, Ma, but I'll try. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I won't let that happen. I said, giving him a reassuring smile. And neither will Jamal. We're in this together. There was a shift in the room, a subtle but powerful change. The tension wasn't gone, but it had loosened. Malik didn't look as angry, and Jamal seemed to understand more than I had thought. I knew this wouldn't be easy. There were still a lot of obstacles to overcome, but I could feel the first stirrings of acceptance. My boys were starting to see that this wasn't just about me. This was about our future, our family, and the legacy I wanted to build for them. A legacy that wasn't just built on hard work and sacrifice, but on trust, love, and a chance to finally thrive. The next day, I met with David again. This time, I felt more sure of myself. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for us, for my sons. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a life decision, and it was mine to make. "Let's do it," I said, looking David in the eye. "Let's make it happen." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making the right choice. A choice that wasn't just about surviving, but about living. Finally, the changes to the cafe were happening fast, faster than I had imagined possible. David's team came in with ideas that were both exciting and overwhelming. They replaced the old, tired furniture, bringing in sleek tables and comfortable chairs. The walls, once a dull beige, were transformed into an inviting mix of rich blues and warm yellows. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was becoming a place that people would want to spend time in, a place where they could feel like they belonged. But as the cafe took on a new life, the tension at home only grew. Malik was still struggling to accept all these changes. He would come by less often, as if avoiding the place that now felt so different. And when he did show up, it was with a cold, distant air, like he was walking into someone else's world instead of his own. Jamal, as usual, kept his thoughts to himself, but I could feel him watching me, gauging every decision I made, waiting for me to falter. It hurt more than I'd like to admit. I knew they were both trying to protect me, trying to make sure I didn't get hurt again. But it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. David noticed the shift in my mood one evening when we met to review the latest round of changes. He had a way of noticing the smallest things, of reading people in a way that made him seem almost unnervingly perceptive. "Monica," he said gently, his eyes fixed on me as I flipped through the design mock-ups for the cafe's new logo. "You're not yourself tonight. Something's on your mind." I looked up, surprised by his observation. I hadn't realized how much my concerns had been weighing on me until he pointed it out. "It's nothing," I said quickly, trying to brush it off. "Just trying to juggle everything. You know, with the cafe, the changes at home, it's a lot." David leaned forward slightly, his voice softer. "You don't have to do it all alone, Monica. I know you've been carrying a heavy load for a long time, but you've got people here who want to help, including me." I met his gaze, and for a brief moment I saw something deeper in his eyes, something more than just business. There was an understanding there, a kind of connection I hadn't realized we shared. "I appreciate it," I said, my voice shaky. I'm worried about Malik and Jamal. I don't think they're on board with everything that's happening. It feels like I'm losing them, David." David's face softened. "I can't pretend to know exactly what you're going through with them, but I've seen families go through changes like this. It's never easy. But sometimes people need time. They need space to see things for what they are, not just what they fear." I looked down at the plans in front of me, not sure how to process his words. He was right, of course. I could feel the shift in my relationship with my sons, the growing divide between what I wanted for them and what they wanted for themselves. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't force them to understand. "I don't know if I can wait, though," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "I'm running out of time." David gave me a quiet, understanding smile. You've waited long enough, you don't have to keep putting yourself last, and you don't have to carry all this weight by yourself. Let me help you. Let us help you. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I didn't have to do it all on my own. Maybe David was right. Maybe the time had come for me to stop sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of keeping everyone else content. The next day, after our meeting, I decided to make a change. I had to talk to Malik and Jamal. I couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. I had to face it head-on, no matter how difficult it would be. They deserved to know where I was coming from, what I had been trying to build, why I was doing this. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to help them see what I saw, the potential for a better future, not just for me, but for them too. I called Malik first. It was late in the afternoon and the cafe was starting to slow down. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number, my hands shaking as I waited for him to pick up. "Hello?" Malik's voice sounded flat, like he had been expecting this call but wasn't quite ready for it. "Malik," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about everything that's been going on. Can you come by the cafe?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Yeah, I'll be there in a bit," he finally said. I hung up and leaned back against the counter, taking a deep breath. It was time to lay it all out, to stop pretending like everything was fine. I needed to show him that this wasn't just about the cafe or about David. This was about our future. Our future. Malik walked in an hour later, his posture stiff, his eyes guarded. He sat down across from me at one of the small tables in the corner of the cafe, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Ma," he started, his voice hesitant, "I don't know what you want me to say. I've been thinking about all this stuff with the cafe, and I don't get it. I don't get why you're letting him do all this, why you're letting someone like him change everything." I took a deep breath, the words I had been rehearsing for days finally coming to the surface. "Malik, I know this is hard for you to understand, and I know you're angry, but I need you to listen. This isn't about him. This is about us. I'm trying to give us a future that isn't just about scraping by, a future where we don't have to work ourselves into the ground just to keep our heads above water." His eyes flickered with something that looked like disbelief. "You don't get it, Ma. We've always been able to do it on our own. Why do we need him? Why do you need him?" "I need him because, for the first time in a long time, I'm not doing it alone," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of my words. "I'm tired of trying to hold everything together on my own. I'm tired of feeling like I'm carrying all of us all the time. I want more than that, Malik. I want something better for you, for Jamal, for me. I can't keep fighting this fight by myself." Malik didn't speak for a long time, his gaze fixed on the table between us. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn, caught between the way he had been raised to think and the person I was becoming. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I raised him. I wasn't the same woman who had struggled silently, carrying the weight of our family on my shoulders. I was changing, and I knew that scared him. Finally, he looked up at me, his face softening. "I just don't want to lose you, Ma. I don't want to see you get hurt again." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "You won't lose me, Malik. I'm still your mother. I'm still here. But I need you to trust me. I'm doing this for us, not just for me." For the first time in weeks, Malik didn't pull away. His hand stayed under mine, and I could see the fight slowly leaving his eyes. It wasn't all resolved, not yet, but I could feel the first crack in the wall he had built between us. "I'll try," he said quietly. "I'll try to understand." I smiled, the weight on my chest lightening just a little. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was a start. We were starting to find our way back to each other. And that, in the end, was all I needed. The days following my conversation with Malik felt like I was walking a tightrope. The air between us had shifted, but I could still feel the tension lingering, a quiet uncertainty that neither of us knew how to dissolve completely. But the simple fact that he was willing to try, That, I realized, was a victory in itself. And it gave me hope. Hope that, no matter how complicated things got, we could navigate this together. It wasn't just Malik I had to worry about, though. Jamal was still quiet, still watching from the sidelines, as if waiting for something to happen that would finally give him peace. I could feel his eyes on me every time I made a decision about the cafe, every time I spoke with David, every time I mentioned the future. Jamal wasn't angry like Malik. He was more cautious, more introspective. But the weight of his silence was just as heavy, if not heavier, than the loud frustration I faced with Malik. The cafe was moving forward, no matter what was happening at home. David was working tirelessly with his team to bring the new vision to life, and I had to admit, it was starting to look incredible. The renovations were coming along faster than I had anticipated. The walls were painted, the new furniture was in place, and the updated logo was ready for its grand unveiling. The energy in the place was changing, and so was my own. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that had the potential to last, not just for me, but for my sons, and for the community I had worked so hard to create. David was more involved now, his presence at the cafe growing more frequent. He was no longer just a businessman helping me out. He was becoming a part of the daily fabric of my life. And though I had tried to guard myself from letting him in too deeply, I couldn't help but appreciate the steady hand he offered in the midst of the chaos. He wasn't like anyone I had known before. He didn't want anything from me other than for me to succeed. And for once, I wasn't scared of that. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings when things started to come together. I had just opened the cafe, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air when Jamal walked in. He looked different today, less tense, more at ease. There was something about him that caught me off guard, a quiet confidence that I hadn't seen in a while. "Hey, Ma," he said, his voice warmer than I expected. "Morning, baby," I said, wiping my hands on the apron as I met his gaze. "You're up early." He shrugged, the corners of his mouth curling up in a small, genuine smile. "Just wanted to stop by, thought I'd give you a hand before school." I felt my heart tighten at his offer. It was so simple, so small, but it meant everything. For weeks, it had felt like he was holding back from me, from this place, from everything. But now he was here, and that was all I needed to see. "Thanks," I said, my voice soft. "That means a lot." We worked together in comfortable silence for a while. I could feel the weight of unspoken words between us, but today, for the first time, it didn't feel like a wall we couldn't break through. Instead, it felt like the start of something new, a bridge being built between us, piece by piece. After a while, Jamal spoke again. "Ma, I've been thinking a lot about the cafe, about what you're doing." I stopped what I was doing, turning to face him fully. "And?" He looked at me, his eyes steady, no longer avoiding my gaze. "I get it now. I get why you're doing all this, why you're trusting David. I've been holding back because I didn't understand, but I do now. You're not just trying to fix things, you're trying to make them better for all of us." The words hung in the air for a long moment, and I could feel the lump rise in my throat. This wasn't just about the cafe anymore. This was about us. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when Jamal, too, began to understand that everything I had done, every step I had taken, was to build a better future. Not just for me, but for all of us. "I'm proud of you, Ma," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "I don't know if I told you that enough." I reached out, pulling him into a hug, not caring if the other customers were watching. This was the moment I had fought for. A moment when my sons understood me, when they saw my heart, my intention, and my struggle. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that all the sacrifices I had made were worth it, because I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, as the cafe quieted down and the last few customers trickled out, I sat in the corner, sipping my coffee. I looked around the space, seeing the vision I had held in my mind for so long coming to life. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was ours. Every table, every chair, every picture on the wall was a piece of the future I had been trying to create. A future where we weren't just surviving, but thriving. David walked in just as I was lost in thought, his eyes immediately finding mine. There was a warmth in his gaze now, a quiet understanding between us that had deepened over the last few weeks. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. He just sat down across from me, giving me the space to speak if I wanted to. I took a deep breath, my heart still full from the conversation with Jamal earlier. "You were right," I said softly, looking up at David. "This is all so much bigger than I ever thought it could be. But it's not just about the cafe, it's about our lives, my sons, our future. And I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, we can really make it happen." David's smile was genuine, the weight of the last few months lifting from his shoulders as he leaned back in his chair. "You've done all the hard work, Monica. You've built something incredible here. I just helped you see the potential." I shook my head. "No, we did it together, and that's something I've never had before, not like this." For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to truly believe in what was possible. The future was still uncertain, still filled with obstacles, but for the first time, I wasn't walking that road alone. And that made all the difference. The next few weeks passed in a blur of excitement and hard work. The cafe was growing in popularity, and we were starting to see the changes we had worked so hard for. But the most rewarding part wasn't the growing customer base or the revamped space. It was the shift within my family. Malik was still hesitant, but he was coming around. Jamal, who had once stood quietly on the sidelines, was now a part of this dream, too. And together, we were slowly rebuilding the trust that had been strained for so long. David continued to help in ways that went beyond just business. He had become a steady presence, not just in the cafe, but in our lives. But he wasn't the only one who had played a role in this transformation. It was the small moments, the quiet conversations with Malik and Jamal, the moments when we connected in ways we hadn't in years, that had truly made this feel like a new beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be challenges, more tough decisions, and plenty of moments where I'd question if we were doing the right thing. But for the first time, I felt a sense of peace, a sense that we were on the right path. And that, in itself, was enough to keep moving forward. The cafe was bustling more than it ever had. The familiar hum of conversation, the clink of coffee cups, and the soft music in the background created a sense of warmth that had always been missing. It felt like the place was finally becoming what I had always dreamed of, a space that not only served good food and coffee, but a space that brought people together. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was a symbol of everything we had fought for, everything we had built together. David was still a regular fixture, and though I had pulled back from depending on him completely, there was no denying the impact he had made on the cafe's success. The changes we had made were paying off. The customers were coming in droves, and the community was starting to take notice. What we had built was no longer just a business. It was something with heart, something that resonated with people in a way I hadn't expected. But even as the cafe flourished, I knew we couldn't ignore the deeper work that still needed to be done within our family. Things had improved, yes, but there were still walls to break down, doubts to address. Malik had softened somewhat, though I could tell he was still struggling to fully accept the changes. He would come in to help occasionally, but his skepticism was still there, lingering in the corners of every conversation we had about the future. Jamal, on the other hand, was growing more confident. He had started to take a more active role in the cafe, helping out with some of the management duties and even suggesting new ideas. It was like I was seeing him for the first time as an adult, as someone who had the potential to lead, to make decisions that could shape our future. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet sadness that still lingered. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew he was still carrying something he hadn't fully let go of. One afternoon, after a particularly busy lunch rush, I found myself alone in the back of the cafe, sorting through some of the financials. The place had quieted down for a moment, and I took advantage of the lull to gather my thoughts. It was in the midst of this quiet that Malik walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking around. I could tell he was still trying to figure out how he felt about everything. The cafe, David, the changes. It was clear that he hadn't yet fully embraced the vision I had worked so hard to build. But today, he seemed different, not angry, not distant, just lost in a way that made my heart ache. "Ma," he said quietly, finally breaking the silence. "Can we talk?" I looked up, surprised. For weeks, he had avoided serious conversations, had kept everything between us in the realm of casual pleasantries. This was new. "Of course," I said, setting the papers aside. I motioned for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" Malik sat down slowly, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. For a long moment, he didn't speak. It was as if he was weighing his words, searching for the right way to say what had been on his mind for so long. "I've been thinking a lot, Ma, about everything, about what you've done with the cafe, and about how much you've changed." I waited, letting him gather his thoughts, letting the silence settle between us. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I wasn't sure how to prepare for what he was about to say. "I was wrong," he continued, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "I was wrong to think you were doing this just for yourself. I didn't get it. I didn't get that you were doing this for us, for me, for Jamal." I felt the air around me shift. This wasn't just a simple apology. This was something deeper, something that reached to the heart of everything we had been struggling with. "I see it now, Ma. I see what you were trying to do. I was mad because I didn't understand. I didn't want to see that maybe you needed help. That maybe you couldn't do it all by yourself anymore." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. His words hit me harder than I thought they would. It wasn't just that he was admitting he was wrong. It was that he was finally seeing the bigger picture, the one I had been trying to show him all along. "You don't have to apologize, Malik," I said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "I understand why you were upset. I've been doing this on my own for so long, and I've kept you and Jamal at arm's length, thinking that I had to protect you from all of it, but I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not doing this alone, and I don't want you to feel like you have to either." Malik looked up at me, his eyes serious, the weight of everything we had been through settling between us. "I don't want to lose you, Ma. I don't want you to change, but I understand now. I just didn't want you to stop needing me." I squeezed his hand. "I'll always need you, Malik, but I can't keep living like I'm just surviving. I want us to live truly live. Together, I need you to be a part of that. You, Jamal, and me, this cafe, this life. It's ours. It's not just mine anymore. It never was." There was a long silence, and for the first time in weeks, Malik smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough. It was enough to tell me that, despite everything, we were starting to bridge the gap between us. Later that evening, after the cafe had closed and the last of the staff had gone home, I sat with Jamal in the quiet of the back room. It was just the two of us, the dim light from the kitchen casting shadows on the walls. "Jamal," I started, my voice softer than I meant for it to be, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about how hard all of this has been for you." He looked up at me, his face unreadable. "It's not just the cafe, Ma. It's everything. It's like I'm stuck between the past and the future, and I don't know how to move forward." I nodded slowly, understanding more than he realized. "I know, I feel that way too sometimes. But we can't stay stuck, Jamal. Not anymore. We've got to find a way forward together. I can't make all the decisions on my own anymore, and I don't want to, but I need you with me. I need you to believe in what we're doing here." For the first time, Jamal's expression softened. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the ceiling for a long moment, as if weighing everything I had said. Then, quietly, he spoke. "I'll try, Ma. I'll try to believe, I just don't want to mess it up." "You won't mess it up, Jamal. You're not alone in this. We're doing this together." And for the first time, I felt that quiet hope I had been missing. We were a family again, not just surviving, but finally starting to live. The future wasn't set in stone, but it was ours to shape. The cafe continued to grow, and so did my family. Malik began to take on more responsibility, his doubts melting away as he saw the changes we were making together. Jamal, too, found his place, becoming more involved in the daily operations. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was ours. As I stood behind the counter one evening, watching my sons work side by side, I realized something important. This cafe wasn't just a business. It was a testament to everything we had overcome and everything we still had ahead of us. The road hadn't been easy, but we had finally found our way back to each other. And together, we were building something that would last. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. And for the first time, that was enough.